So imagine this, a presidential election, right? And the winner pulls in like almost 80% of the vote in just one region.
Yeah, complete sweep there.
Exactly. But then struggles pretty much everywhere else. That's exactly what happened in Malawi back in 1999. And it tells you something, pretty deep straight away about where loyalties really lie, the power of political alliances, and maybe some lessons that are surprisingly still relevant today, especially if you're trying to figure out how political landscapes actually shift and change.
That's absolutely right. Today, we're really going to dig into the results from the 1999 Malawi general elections. We'll be using the numbers, the available analysis of how different regions voted, that sort of thing.
Right.
And the goal really is to pull out those key bits of knowledge, those insights, especially, for you, if you're keen on grasping the forces underneath political dynamics and maybe how younger generations can find their own space within that.
So we're looking at presidential results, parliamentary ones.
Yep. Region by region, see what patterns, jump out at us.
Okay. So by the time we wrap this up, you should have a much clearer picture of Malawi's political map back then in 99. What factors really swayed those results? And maybe some surprising takeaways about regional identity, why alliances matter or don't, and the need for, a national vision in politics. Plus, we'll definitely explore what these older trends might mean if you're young and thinking about, maybe getting involved politically yourself. Okay, let's dive in. Regional political strengths. What really stands out?
Well, the first thing that just leaps off the page from 99 is how incredibly different the support was across Malawi's regions. Let's start with the northern region.
Okay.
The data shows just this overwhelming support for Gwanda Chakwamba. He was representing the MCP-AFARD alliance. He got almost 88% of the presidential vote up there.
88%? Wow.
Yeah. And it wasn't just the presidency. AFARD, his partner party, they basically dominated the parliamentary elections in the north, won 28 seats.
So nearly 9 out of 10 voters in the north went for Chakwamba. That's more than just a win, isn't it? It feels like a statement. What was driving that kind of massive support for that specific alliance?
Well, the North backing the MCP-AFARD alliance so strongly, it kind of highlights a key point, right? In regions that have a really distinct political identity, these strategic alliances can be incredibly effective at getting voters out.
Makes sense.
For AFARD, its roots, its focus, it was very much tied to northern interests, so that likely gave them huge sway. And the alliance structure then let the MCP kind of piggyback on that regional strength. They benefited from that partnership in a way they probably wouldn't have alone in the north.
Interesting. Okay, so a really clear example of how teaming up can lock down a region. Now, what about the central region? Chakwamba did well there too, didn't it?
He did, yeah. The central region also gave a pretty decisive win to Gwanda Chakwamba, 61.14% of the presidential vote. But if you look at the parliament results there, it was the MCP itself that was really in control. They secured 54 seats.
Okay, so hold on. A different party leading in parliament compared to the north.
MCP stronghold.
Even though the same alliance candidate, Chakwamba, won the presidential vote. So what's that telling us about the political mood, the leanings in the central region?
Well, it points to the lasting power of the MCP. The central region has, historically been the Malawi Congress Party's base, goes way back to the Kamuzu Banda era.
Right.
So it suggests that, these established parties, the ones with a really long history in a place, they can build up this incredibly deep loyalty and trust with voters over time.
Okay, got it. So the North kind of leaned into the alliance, probably driven by AFARD's regional focus, while the center showed its, let's say, continued faith in the old guard, the MCP, within that same alliance. Right now, the southern region looks like a totally different picture down there.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
The southern region was overwhelmingly behind Bakili Maluzi and his party, the UDF, the United Democratic Front. Maluzi pulled in a massive 77.15% of the presidential vote in the South.
77%. Huge.
Huge. And that strong showing for president translated directly into parliamentary power. The UDF won 77 of its total 93 seats just in the southern region alone.
Almost total control for the UDF in the South, then. What was it about Maluzi and the UDF that just connected so strongly with voters down there?
Well, the UDF was widely perceived as, the party for the southern region. And crucially, people seemed to feel the UDF was actually delivering benefits, policies that really spoke to the needs of people in the South.
Both rural and urban.
Yeah, both in rural areas and in the big cities like Blantyre and Zomba. That feeling that a party gets you prioritizes your region. that likely played a massive role.
Yeah, we see Eastern Malawi sort of follow the South's lead in this election, too.
Yes, largely. Eastern Malawi's voting patterns pretty much mirrored the southern regions, contributing to that overall UDF sweep in the south, probably influenced by cultural ties, maybe some ethnic connections. Plus, President Malusi was smart. He used development projects, patronage networks in the east, and that helped cement UDF support.
Okay, so we have these really distinct regional power bases, one for each major political force, it seems. Let's zoom out a bit and look at the overall party picture, the parliamentary power. The numbers really do paint a picture of a country quite divided politically, don't they?
They really do. Look, the UDF came out on top with 93 seats in parliament, but their strength was like super concentrated in the south and parts of the center. Very little presence up north.
Right.
Then you had the MCP with 66 seats, strong in the center, as we said, but not much traction down south. And AFORD, 29 seats, almost entirely a northern thing. They struggled to get a foothold anywhere else.
And the few independents didn't really change that basic map.
No, the four independents, they didn't fundamentally shift that regionalized picture.
So the UDF gets the presidency and controls parliament. But as you're saying, this wasn't because everyone suddenly loved the UDF nationwide. It was more about the strength of their regional base.
Precisely. The UDF held the power, sure. But the election results shout loud and clear about just how regional political loyalty was in Malawi back then. Neither the MCP nor AFORD managed to really stretch their regional appeal across the whole country.
Why do you think that was? Just geographical distance or?
Partly geography, maybe historical factors, how the parties developed. Their support was just too geographically boxed in. And that concentration of support, that's a really key insight from '99.
Okay. We've mapped the regions, the parliamentary power. Let's dig a bit deeper now into the sort of broader political lessons here. What strategies actually worked and what just didn't?
Well, what clearly worked for the UDF was their skill at mobilizing voters right down at the grassroots level. And that targeted outreach in the big urban centers, Blantyre, Zomba. They really understood local dynamics. On the flip side, the fact that the MCP-AFORD alliance posed such a strong challenge, that shows the potential, right? Opposition parties can unite and seriously worry an incumbent government, even if they just fall short in the end.
So alliances have potential.
Definitely. And underneath it all, you see that enduring power of regional loyalty, that long-term trust people place in the parties they feel represent them.
Okay, and where did things kind of fall apart? Or what were the big hurdles?
Well, for the MCP-AFORD alliance, a big weakness seems to have been maybe internal unity. Cohesion.
Yeah.
You get the sense that disagreements, maybe different priorities, stop them from presenting that truly solid single front.
Internal politics, yeah.
Yeah. And also, while AFORD absolutely dominated the North, like we said, that massive regional support alone just wasn't enough to win nationally. It shows the limits, right? You can't win just by locking down one region.
Need broader appeal.
Exactly. And one other thing that really stands out, looking back, is the representation, or lack thereof. Parliament was overwhelmingly older men. Very few young people, very few women. That suggests a pretty big gap in democratic inclusivity back then.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Okay, these are really useful takeaways. Now, let's pivot a bit and think directly about our listener, particularly if you're a young person maybe considering your own path in politics. What specific lessons from this '99 election could you actually apply today?
Right. Well, this election, it offers quite a few valuable pointers for young people thinking about stepping into politics. First off, regional identity. It's important, right? Understanding your roots, connecting locally, that's often a starting point.
Sure.
But it's absolutely vital to then build a national vision, something that speaks to young people right across Malawi, not just in your home region. So build on local connections, definitely, but aim broader. Transcend those geographical lines.
That's a great point. Local roots, national perspective.
Yeah.
Essential for real impact. What else should young aspiring leaders keep in mind?
Well, think about that MCP-AFORD alliance again. Even though it didn't quite win, its near success really highlights how important alliances can be strategically. So for young people, actively look for partners. Build coalitions. Could be other young leaders, maybe across party lines even. Could be civil society groups, other interest groups. Find people who share your basic values, your vision for the future. Remember that whole stronger together idea. It really applies here. Collective action packs a bigger punch.
Okay, so collaboration, building coalitions, key strategies. What about actually understanding the voters?
Absolutely critical. Look, voters might have their traditional loyalties, yeah, but they're also open to change. They're open to new ideas, especially if they see real solutions to the problems they face every day.
So focus on the practical stuff.
Exactly. Young people getting into politics should really focus on understanding what communities actually need, what are their specific concerns, and then propose tangible solutions. Local development, jobs, better services, showing you're committed to improving people's actual lives, that's crucial.
And practically, within the political system itself, where should they maybe focus their energy?
Well, the presidency gets a lot of headlines, obviously, but parliament, that's where a lot of the detailed policy work gets done, where laws are shaped.
Right? The legislative engine room.
Precisely. So young people should think strategically about constituencies. Where do you have a realistic shot at winning a seat? Maybe look at areas where, older MPs might be retiring. That can create openings for fresh faces, new leadership.
That's very practical advice. What about the tools? How do you connect with voters now compared to 99?
Good question. Back then, the UDF used radio really effectively and that urban outreach we talked about today. Young people have this huge arsenal of communication tools.
Social media, obviously.
Social media, yeah, all the digital platforms. But don't forget radio, it's still really relevant in many places. The key is to use all these tools strategically, figure out how to reach different groups of voters wherever they are.
And what about dealing with the past, the legacies of these big political figures?
Yeah, you can't ignore history. Understanding the impact of leaders like Bunda, Malusi, Chakwamba, that's essential context. Learn from what they did well and what they didn't. See how they shaped the landscape you're entering.
But don't get stuck there.
Exactly. Learn from it, then consciously build your own political brand for today. Maybe that means reframing old messages for modern ears, or tackling today's issues in completely new ways.
So respect the past, but build for the future.
Okay, thinking about right now, what's maybe the biggest opportunity for young Malawians wanting to make a political difference?
I think the youth of Malawi have this incredible chance to be a unifying force.
Yeah.
They can actually bridge some of those divides. We've seen regional, generational, even political party divides that have often defined the country's politics.
Be the bridge generation.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
By really promoting a sense of shared Malawian identity, focusing on common goals, they could genuinely lead the way to a more cohesive, more prosperous future for the whole country.
That's a really powerful thought. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up the main points, the 1999 elections really showed that strong regionalism, those established loyalties, they were huge factors, but it also showed change was possible and that alliances could be really potent.
And for young people looking at it today, the big message seems to be learn from history, yes, but build bridges. Really understand what voters need now and use today's tools to shape a whole new political future.
Exactly right. The patterns of the past, they don't have to be chains, It really is up to new generations to bring in those fresh ideas, the innovative platforms, the bold thinking.
So as we've sort of unpacked here, the 99 Malawi elections give us this fascinating window into a nation finding its democratic feet. Those strong regional votes, the almost success of that united opposition, they really highlight forces that often endure in politics. And for you, thinking about your own potential part in all this, those lessons about building connections, understanding voters, using new tools, they're incredibly valuable, aren't they?
They really are. And it makes you think, given how much the world has changed since 99 socially, economically, technologically, how might these same deep down regional dynamics play out in Malawi's next election? And what different strategies will younger generations actually need to use to really make their mark on the national stage? That's definitely something to chew on.